Hi everyone, good morning. I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, Bhaskar. Morning.
Very good morning. So in the last session, we set up our resources for our use case. So I'm just going to take you through again. So what I'm trying to do here is I wanted to move the data from database to Azure Data Lake Storage Center. So that was my requirement. So in order to satisfy that particular requirement, we required Azure Data Factory. We already set up Azure Data Factory in last session. I mean to say before winding up the session, we already set up all the resources. And Azure SQL Server is required. So that also we set up. And how we can access that with the help of Data Factory, we'll see that. And ADLS Gen 2 also is, ADLS Gen 2 setup also is done. And I'm just going to cross verify all of them. Let's open the Data Factory and then we'll come back and talk about copy data activity. So let's go to the portal.azure.com. Now I'm just going to launch our data factory, but let's go and open from the resource group. So this is our master data engineering is our resource group. So here I have all the resources. I'm just going to open first to data factory, launch your data factory studio. Let's go back to this tab, go to your resource group again. Then I wanted to open the storage account. And let me duplicate this space I required. So let me go for storage account. Let's go to the containers. So I do not have a containers. Okay, so I need to have a container to load the data because I'm going to use this account as a target. So to store the data here, we required containers. So I'm just going to say my container name is data files. My name of the container, you can keep. Generally, we used to have a container names like landing, bronze, silver, and gold. Okay, so in real time, the naming standards we are going to have like this. And even if they wanted to give a different naming standard, they can give it. But for here, I'm just going to take a data files. It's a generic naming standard. I'm just taking it. Let's hit on create. So we need to create a container. Inside the container, I wanted to store the data. So container is a root directory. Container is a root directory. Container is a root directory. Okay. So inside the root directory, you can have a multiple directories also. If I wanted to create any directory, I will use the Azure Data Factory itself. So Azure Data Factory itself is going to create a directory. Azure can have a capability to create a files and is have a capability to create a directory also. So all this stuff we are going to come across with the Data Factory. So here what I've done, I set up SQL Server in the last session and the name of the database was source. And the target is the ADLS. The ADLS is your data files. So data files is your target. I need to bring the data from here to here. So in order to read the data from here, we are going to use the activity called copy activity. We are going to use copy activity. We already seen how we can copy data from the file system. So now we are going to see how we can copy data from the database. Now, if you want to copy data from the database, we never directly go and copy the data.
Bhaskar, good
First,
morning, Bhaskar.
yeah, very good
I
morning.
just now started.
It's just now only.
Okay, okay.
Just now only. Just 2 minutes.
Okay, okay.
So if you want to start, or if you wanted to start copying data from the source, first you need to do data discovery, right? So data discovery or analysis, we can say. So whatever the naming standard you wanted to call, you can call. Okay, so you have to identify is tables are available or what columns are required. What is the data source? What is the key column? All those things we're going to do it. So at this point of time, I wanted to connect my source system. I wanted to check. I wanted to check the tables. You just imagine. So first you need to connect it, right? Without connecting, you cannot directly go and you don't do it. Okay, basically, as a data engineer, we never do directly with data fact itself. Just have a look on the database. If it is a SQL server, then you are going to connect to the SQL server. If it is an Oracle, then you are going to connect to the Oracle, whatever it is. All the databases have their own client tools to interact with the databases. If we take a SQL server, we have a SQL Server Management Studio to connect and see. Okay, so if you have a SQL Server, you can also use, apart from the SQL Server Management Studio, you can also use Azure Data Studio. Azure Data Studio is one of the client. Any one of them can use to interact with the database. So these client tools are much more flexible for database. If you go for Oracle, we have a SQL developer, I guess. Okay, so SQL developer is there. Okay, so I'm sure about it. One of them I used. Very initial days of my career, I used the Toad to talk with the database. Okay, so for every database, there is a one client tool. Okay, and if you go for MySQL, there is a something like Workbench or something is there, if I'm correct. Okay, so in my system, I have a MySQL and SQL Server, and I'm going to show you these two databases, and if possible, I'll try to bring even Oracle also, but I did not set up it. I need to set up and need to bring it.
Sir, what is the difference of MySQL and SQL Server? Both are Microsoft tool, no?
No, MySQL is a open source. Okay, so it's a open source. MySQL is a open source. So because of that reason, many companies will use if they're not interested to pay. See, MySQL is getting provided from the cloud also as a paid service, not a free service. So they will support. Microsoft will support. Microsoft will support if any customer is facing an issues. But I'm not sure whether this MySQL provides a support or not.
Which is good? MySQL is good, yeah, SQL Server is good, I think.
Man, Microsoft means SQL Server only. See, there are many people. Okay, so we cannot say this is good or this is bad. Depends on your uses.
For a little bit, I'm
Okay.
confused in between MySQL and SQL Server. That's why I asked.
Okay, so basically, you have an iPhone. Okay, and if you take like Geophone is also there, right? If I'm correct. So if you ask me which one is good and which one is bad, depends on the usage, we can say. Okay, so this is also getting used, right?
Hmm.
So depends on the requirement, we can say. Okay, so if there is a big, and I mean, bigger customers, they may go for this one. And if they don't have a much more budget, then they can go for this. Intention is to get the solution, to talk to each other. That is the main target.
Hmm.
Okay, so depends on the users people used to give. Okay, so there are some some usages are there specific to MySQL. They used to have some naming standard. I forgot it basically.
So
Uh,
what code I will use in SQL
Same
Server?
only. See,
The same code.
all databases can understand SQL.
Yeah.
Okay, all mobiles like you're having an Android operating system. In the same way, we're going to have a SQL across all RDBMS tools. So there may be slight difference when you compare with one RDBMS and other RDBMS. They are very minor. You cannot you don't feel that is a difference. Okay.
Yeah, Bhaskar.
Now I'm just going to show you how we can connect with the SQL Server. In my system, I have installed already SQL Server, and I'll share how to install SQL Server, on-prem SQL Server. So just go through that. That particular record is going to say downloading of your SQL Server 2022 and installation approach and restoring some sample databases. Whatever I said in my Google Drive, we can download them and restore those databases. Okay, and apart from the SQL Server, it is also going to talk about SSMS installation, SQL Server Management Studio. After these two installations, then you need to restore the databases. Okay, you just follow that. Yeah.
Sources. From where we get the resources?
I'll give that.
Okay.
So basically, this restoring databases you will get only once you paid. You just share your Gmail. If you already shared a Gmail with me, definitely you may have access it. You can have it. You don't need to search for anywhere. But this particular system you have to download from the Google. Okay, so I have explained the approach how we can download and how we can restore all this step by step. And I'll share one 10 or 15 minutes recording session is there. You just follow that and set up in your system. And if anyone is facing an issue, just bring it on tomorrow and we're going to talk about it. So tomorrow session is only like, what issues you're facing. Is everyone having a environment set up ready, like data factory or SQL server setup? All these things, everyone should be ready by tomorrow itself. If anyone is facing an issue. So if you are not facing an issue, please continue your practice, because I know few people are already started practicing. They're making it down. Okay, so if anyone is stuck anywhere, just connect on tomorrow. I'll help you on tomorrow. Now let's open SQL Server Management Studio. Basically, let me close this and reopen. So once you install, you're going to have a SQL Server Management Studio. So this is a client tool to talk to the database. Let's open it or hit on it. Now, basically, I wanted to connect my Azure SQL Server. My source is a Azure SQL Server database, right? I need to connect to my database that is there in the cloud. So to connect to the cloud, you need to have a server name. So whenever you wanted to connect any database, what you require is make sure you are connecting with the database engine, because database is always going to have a database engine. So 100% you are going to use only if you have a MSB experience. You may go for different services, but you just ignore all of them. As a data engineer, we are going to connect to the database. So we need to choose the database engine here, and then server name is required. I told you if you wanted to take the items to collect or to transfer the items as a packers and movers, we required address details. I talked about it, right? So if you don't know the address, then you cannot connect to your database. You cannot directly, you can use the ADF to connect it, but before going to that, why don't you check with the SQL Server Management Studio? Is particular system able to connect or not? Is table available or not? You can check it. So for that, we require a server name. So server name will be provided by your customer or your team. If you're a very new member to the team, then definitely you will be having some documentation, or someone is going to provide the details. You don't worry about it. And authentication type is required. What type of authentication we are going to use to connect it? So that also is going to be decided by your team or your customer. So when I say customer, there will be solution architects. Many people are going to be there. The approach of the connectivity. So someone has to say, you're a new member of the project, or if you're a new support or anything that you can take. So someone has to provide in the initial days. So what type of authentication they will give, depends on the credentials, you can understand what type of authentication it is. So mostly people used to go for Microsoft Entra when we have a Microsoft SQL server, but there is a chances to use a SQL server authentication also, especially when you go for cloud. When you go for cloud database, then there is a chances to use either one of the connectivity.
What is the difference, Microsoft Entra and
So
SQL?
Microsoft Entra is your email ID. Okay, you can use email ID. And SQL authentication is they will give the user alias. Username will be provided. Did you get my point? Microsoft one account can connect all the systems. So that is what Microsoft Entra. It's an active directory, previously known as. Okay, so MFA they used to give it Microsoft multi-factor authentication. Okay, so Microsoft multi-factor authentication, or we can say it is a Microsoft Entra. The naming standard, anything that you can feel that that's not a big deal to connect it. Okay, and I'm going to use here SQL authentication because while creating this particular server in the cloud in the last session, we created as SQL authentication, if you remember. So administrator details itself I'm going to use. Basically, you're going to get the username and password. So based on that, you're going to connect it. Now let me take my server name to practice. You need to know it, right? So let's go to your server or database. Just open it. You can find the server name here. You can see server name. And pricing tier is basic. And what else? Subscription, location, status, resource group. So this are all not required for us. For us, we required only server name. You just copy this and go to your SQL Server Management Studio and paste it. Sorry, here you need to paste it. And then password you remember, right? While creating this setup, we remember it. But at the time of working, you're going to get the username. And when the moment to start logging in, it will ask you to change the password.
Azure
Yes.
SQL password you give.
Yes, Azure SQL password. Let's hit on connect. Now it is connected. So it is having a database called source. Just expand it. I have a tables here. And if I expand these tables, I do not have anything here because I did not create any table. It's a brand new database. It's an empty database. Okay, so it is just taking a time because it is a basic pricing tier. So there will be network latency also. That is more enough for us. Now I wanted to create a table to move the data, right? We need to set up a source. In real time, the process will set up. But here for practicing, we have to set up to practice it. So otherwise, you cannot do this use case. You cannot practice this use case. Okay, so I wanted to create a one table here. Okay, so any table that you can create it. Okay, so I wanted to create a basic table. I'm just going to create. Just observe. So from tomorrow, I'm going to use on-prem SQL Server. I mean, from next session. But for this session, I'm going to use Azure SQL Server database. If I wanted to create a table, basically we required SQL knowledge. To create a table, you required SQL knowledge. Okay. But to create a table in this particular systems or in the databases, generally we don't do it most of the times. Then why we required SQL? Why we need to create a table? So we are going to create a delta tables. When you're working as a pure data engineer, I'm sure you're going to create the delta tables. So to create a delta tables, you should have an idea about how we can create a table. So because of that reason, I'm going to take you through the SQL basics. Okay, so how we can create a table and how we are going to feed the data into the tables and how we are going to modify it. So why we need to feed, update or remove, that we are going to do is we are going to have a control tables. So what is control table? I'll talk about it. That is very, very important. We are not going to feed the actual data. We are not going to update the actual data. When I say actual data means it is a business data. We do not have any rights to modify anything in the business. But we are going to use these 3 DML operations for control tables. So what does it mean by control tables? We'll talk slowly in the future sessions.
What is control tables? In my
That's what I'm
project,
saying. That's what I'm saying. We are going to see in the couple of days. Okay, so control table will be used to control your flow of execution, or your we can control the data flow kind of activities, what need to go for execution, or what we need to do, what kind of activity that I wanted to do. So those things we can control from the outside. That is what the data driven pipelines. We are going to create in data factory pipelines called data driven pipelines. Data driven pipelines. This is very, very important. So if you wanted to do this, then you should know about this control table. So to use this control tables, you need to feed the data. Sometimes you need to update. Sometimes you need to remove also. So those things we are going to see very soon. Okay, so on Monday, I'm going to touch this because I'm going to talk about incremental loading. So to talk about the incremental loading, definitely I require control table. We are going to see that. So for time being, I'm just going to feed one base. I'm going to create one basic table and I'll feed some sample data for practicing. Let's hit a new query. I can write a SQL statement. Even if you're not understanding at this point of time, you just ignore whatever I'm doing. You just do it. My intention is to talk about data factory, not about SQL server. So create a table. The table name, I'm just going to say customer. And inside the customer, I wanted to keep customer ID as integer data type, customer name as varchar 100, and customer location. Second, I'm just taking varchar 100 and customer sales. So I'm just creating a one basic table here. Okay, so do not think about what is this integer, varchar. Okay, so all these things I'll give the brief idea at the time of SQL so that you can understand. After completion of our ADF, I'm going to talk about this SQL before going to the Databricks. Because in Databricks, I'm going to create a delta table. So I'll show you how we can create a delta tables. Okay, so mostly you may be aware of it. What is this integer? In general, I'm saying integer will be stored a numbers which is not having a decimal places that we can store with this kind of data types. And varchar will be used to store the text data. Like if I have a Hyderabad, if I wanted to store this, then I need to use this varchar data type. And money, you can store the floating points, or we can store the money data type from the Microsoft we have. The equivalent data type in the Databricks, we're going to have a float data type or decimal data type. So whatever you require that you can take it. I came across both of them in the Databricks. Because Databricks table is different, your underlying data source data types are different. Okay, so you have to take it. When you take this varchar, when you compare, your data source data type is varchar, but when you take the same thing into the Databricks, because your final target is a Databricks. Okay, so the Databricks is going to have a string data type. Okay, so string is going to be there. Okay, we'll see that how exactly we can handle when we are going to talk about the project. So just try to understand. I'm just creating one table here. I have a table. This table is not having any data at this point of time. For practicing, you have to set up all these things. Select star from table name. So select will be used to read the data from the table or tables. I do not have a data here in this particular table. I just wanted to feed 1 or 2 records to understand insert into table. The table is customer values. 101 is the customer ID. Customer is Bhaskar. Location is Hyderabad. So text will be enclosed in a single quote wherever you go. Even when you go for Databricks also, we are going to use the single quote. And Data Factory also takes the single quote. And I mean, Databricks both will be there, single quote and double quote. We can have it, and even we can also take a triple quote also. We'll see that. And then sales is 1000. I'm just taking it. So I'm just feeding one record here. Let's take one more record. 102. Customer is Raja and location is Pune. So I'm just having two records here.
Sir, here why we use arrays?
Where is the array?
Uh-huh. No,
So
no.
basically, what I'm trying to do here is I created a table, right? I need to have some data in the table. If it is a real time, the process will feed the data because it is a business data. Process will feed. But for we are doing our own practice. We have to set up the data from our side. Okay, so use this simple insert statement to load the data into this table. Okay, so this is the syntax that you need to follow. Okay, so don't think much more about this. Okay, so I'll share this code. Okay, so you can just take the same code, and for practicing, my main intention is how we can read the data from the database by using the ADF is important. Okay, so I'm not
Bhaskar,
talking.
one doubt here.
Yeah.
So, do we need that insert into two times for multiple inserts?
See, multiple inserts we don't require. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Do not think
Okay,
about
okay.
SQL now. I'm not talking about
Okay.
SQL. So
Okay.
for time being, you just imagine I wanted to feed two records. Whatever the way you
Okay.
want, you can go.
Okay.
Okay, so let me execute these two statements together. Just give me 1 minute, guys. I'm sorry, I'm back. So I just inserted the data, and if I re-execute the select statement, I have a two records. Okay, so I wanted to load this data from here, from the database to your Azure Data Lake Storage Gen2 as a CSV file. Okay, so let's target only with CSV file. You got my point, right? My source is ready. Is everyone with me? How we can set up our source for practicing?
Yeah.
Now,
Bhaskar, I am not able to connect the server to SQL.
you cannot connect to this server. Did you create your server?
I have already my server SQL server installed.
Why you're connecting along with me? My first question.
Okay.
I'm requesting everyone, please do not do practice along with me. You will lose the context. You are going to have this recording access, no worries. Okay, so you can just do it later. So
Sure.
that will be easy. Okay, so that is
Thank
my request. Now let's go to the data factory. Now the data factory role is going to be started. Let's come to here. Your data source is what? Azure, right? We do not have a link service for this. If you just go and check your link service, the first is integration runtime. Do we really need integration runtime for us? My database is there in the cloud, and my target is also same cloud, ADLS, right? That means Azure only. So here also I have a Azure, and here also I have a Azure. When you use the ADF, we can use Azure IR. We don't need to go for any other IRs to read the data. In the same way, to load the data into the target, we can use the same Azure IR only because both are Azure platforms. So I don't need a Azure integration runtime because I'm already having a Azure integration runtime. I can use that. Now, let's go to link services. In link services, since it is a brand new data factory we created yesterday, it's a brand new data factory, right? Yesterday it was created. So I don't have anything here. You know that I need to bring the data from the database. So one link service is required. And you know that you're going to store in a different platform. It's a different platform, not a same platform. Okay, so if you have a different platform or if you have a different accounts or if you have a different databases, you can go for another link service. So I'm going to create a link service for this source and I'm going to create a link service for target also. So how we are going to create, just observe, hit on plus new. So what is your data source? Your data source is Azure SQL Server. Just all Azure related services are available here. All Azure related services are available. You can see I have a Azure SQL database. You have to choose this. Azure SQL database connector is used to connect to the Azure SQL database. Let's hit on it and hit on continue. Let me give the naming standard as link service underscore AZSQL underscore source. I'm just giving some name for this. And then what integration runtime is required? I required auto resolve integration runtime is nothing but Azure integration runtime. Okay, just leave it everything default. And I'm just going to take the server name. The server name, subscription is required. When the moment to take the subscription, it is going to show the list of servers. I have two servers here. You have to choose the right server. And database name. Automatically it is going to get it in the drop down. You can do it. And if you wanted to make this dynamic, you wanted to make all this dynamic, we can do it. I can use a single link service for all the databases, for all SQL Server databases. Okay, so if I have a multiple Oracle databases, for all databases, I can use only one link service. But this is not right time to show you. We are going to see at the time of project how we can make it dynamic. That is one thing.
Bhaskar, I have
Yeah.
so you are mentioning that we can go dynamic. So is it going to be by a resource group or by a subscription?
No, that is not via subscription only, basically.
Okay.
Okay.
So all the resource groups will also
Yes.
cover under that.
If it is Azure. Okay. If it is on-prem, it
Yeah,
will be little
yeah.
different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Azure.
Yeah. Now we have taken authentication type is SQL authentication. There are other authentications also available. In the interview, there is a chances to ask what kind of authentication you have used. In real time, mostly depends on your requirement. It is going to be there. In my case, I came across system assigned managed identity and SQL authentication. If it is an on-prem, you will be having different approach. I'll show you that on-prem SQL Server and on-prem MySQL we are going to have. So authentication type, you can take whatever the authentication and username you're going to enter, but password you're not going to take directly. You're going to use the Azure Key Vault. So for passwords, because passwords are not shareable, right? So passwords are going to be there as part of this Azure Key Vault. I'll talk about how it is going to be there. For time being, let's go with SQL authentication. Let me say the name of user is Bhaskar. It's not a case sensitive. Username is not case sensitive. You can enter. And password is a case sensitive. You have to use the password. Whatever the way I'm creating a connectivity now, the same way you have to create it. So later, how exactly the real time is going to use that we are going to see in the future sessions. So here first we need to talk about data ingestion and we need to talk about data transformation.
Which password and username are you using here? For the link services, are you using username
Sir,
and password?
can you repeat again?
Username and password are you using for which object? For link services, yeah, SQL database.
For link services only. Username, basically username only. Okay,
You are
basically username.
so
But
you are
even
creating here username and password first time.
yes.
Okay.
Okay. And we have another approach also. We'll see that. Okay, so it will go little complexity because the starting days, right? So I don't want to expand that at this point of time. Just go and provide the connectivity details the way you provided for the SQL Server Management Studio. In the same way, we just provide here. And then just make a test connection. This test connection should be succeeded.
Sir, one doubt, sir.
Uh-huh.
So here you are given username and password. This one is when while we created Azure SQL database in the
Exactly.
cloud.
Exactly.
That one only we have to give.
Exactly.
This username and password is different now from a SQL. What you have?
No, same user only, right? That I used here.
Oh,
What
this.
what user I have used here? SQL authentication, username, and
So this
password.
the same username and password are you
Exactly.
using?
Exactly. Yesterday we created Azure SQL Server, right? We have given admin server admin details.
Okay.
Use the same for practicing.
Okay.
Okay. Use the same credentials only. Let's create it. Now it is created. Then source is created. Then what about target? Target is ADLS. We know already how we can create a link service for ADLS. Let's create it. Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Let's continue. The link service is link service underscore ADLS. And authentication type, when you connect to the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, authentication types, we're having different authentications. Okay, so I'm just leaving it as it is the default. Let's go on subscription. Let's go and take the subscription. And storage account name. The storage account name, I'm just going to take Master Azure Data Engineering, or not sure. Let me check here to cross verify. Master made ADLS Gen 2. Yeah, here it is. Now I just selected the account and just hit on test connection. Now test connection is succeeded because this we already come across it. Let's hit on create. Now link services are created, and once you create the link services, then you need to create a data sets. So data set is required for your source. Data set is required for your source, and data set is required for target.
Here you create two link services. One is Azure SQL and another is for ADLS Gen 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, because two required, right? Because two different platforms. You required 100%. So previously we went for only one link service, but now we require two. You can feel that whether we need two link services or one link service or multiple link services. So
why you not create one link service? Why you create two
man,
link
how
service?
it will possible, man? That is two different platforms.
Yeah, understood.
You understand my point, right? Both are not same.
Yes. If both source and target both are ADLS, then we will use.
Yeah, in that case, we can use one link service.
Yes, understood.
Okay. Now let's go and create two data sets. First, I'm creating a data set here. You can see to create a data set, you can use this option, a new data set. Let's go to the Azure. Same, I'm going to use Azure SQL database here also. Let's take a Azure SQL database and hit on continue. And I'm going to say ds underscore, that means data set underscore source. Because my database name is source, I'm just giving source. You can give anything. Okay, so let's say to differentiate, I'm just going to give age SQL to say it is a Azure SQL database source. And my link service is we already created. I'm just taking it. I wanted to point to the table. So table is pointing. That is fine. So I need a schema. You can just leave the schema. I don't need to worry about it. Okay, so here I have created a data set by pointing to my database and link service, and it is also pointing to the table name also. Okay, so creating a data set with the table name is not the best practice, but still I'm just creating because you are the basic entries, right? We're just entering it. So you need to know we can create it. When the Microsoft has given option, you can do it. Nothing wrong. But I can say this is not the best practice to do it. The best practice to do is you have to avoid the table and you're going to provide the name of the table at the time of running. How we can make it dynamic, we'll see. In the last session, if you remember, we made the data set dynamic. We made the data set dynamic by creating a parameter. In the same approach, we have to provide the table names. Okay, for time being, we just go with the same, whatever the way I'm just doing it. We'll come across it. Let's hit OK. So once you hit OK, now your data set is ready. The look and feel is changed, right? When you see the last time when it was connected to the file system, there is a file path in the data set and different options you have seen. But at the higher level, all these properties are same. There is a connection properties, schema, parameters. This is common for any kind of data source. That is one thing you have to keep in mind. And your source data set is ready. Then if you want to preview the data, you can also preview the data here. You can see how data is getting shown. And now I wanted to create a target data set also. Your target is what? Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Let's take a new data set. Your platform is Azure. And just take Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 and hit on continue. So let's go with the CSV. I'm just taking a CSV file formatted. Let's hit on continue. I'm just going to say the data set is ds underscore data files underscore output underscore customer. And just giving some naming standard for my data set. And link service is required. Whenever you're connecting to the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, if you have a connectors for ADLS related connectors, all those ADLS connectors are going to be displayed here. You have to choose the right connector. And then you can use the browse data files. Inside the data files, I don't have anything. Inside the data files, I don't have anything. And I wanted to provide the folder name here because I wanted to keep inside the output directory here. So I'm just going to keep the output here, and I can also give the file name. I can provide here, or you can later also can provide. Nothing wrong. You can do it later also. And I wanted to keep the first as a header and just make a checkbox. And I don't need the schema. You can just make a none because the file itself is not available. First of all, you don't need a schema for this. So I'm just going to say none and hit OK. You can minimize this. Just scroll up this one. And here also we have a same options only. Connection, schema, and parameters. Okay, so I'm just going to say data files. And here I'm going to enter the value. Here also can enter the value. While creating a data set also, you can enter the name of the folder. And whatever I'm entering here, that we can make it a dynamic also. So for time being, I don't want to go that. So let's go and do customer.csv. I'm just taking the name as customer.csv.
If I will not take, then I will not take output folder, and I will not.
It will keep the data in the data files with anonymous name.
Okay.
Okay. Now you just leave everything default, and I'm just going to create a new pipeline. The pipeline is PL underscore move data from SQL to ADLS.
Microsoft follow what kind of nomenclature when I will give the nomenclature of data set, या pipeline, या link services. So what kind of nomenclature Microsoft follow in this platform?
They don't give the naming standards. Okay.
Pascal case, या normal
You
case.
can give it's not like that. You can have a uppercase, you can have a lowercase, whatever the naming standard that you are following by your company. The naming standard will be decided by your project.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so not by Microsoft. Microsoft can allow anything.
Either capital case, या small.
No, it's not. It's not this kind of approach. It's all depends on the company.
Oh,
So some people they used to keep everything in uppercase. Okay, so I used to follow. This is my own standard that I'm just following. Even in my project, we are using the PL prefix to say that is a pipeline. So
okay.
this next text can be anything. Depends on your requirement. You can keep it. Okay. Now I'm just going to take copy data activity. Just drag and drop it. And it is asking your source. And I told you your copy activity itself is having capability to read the data from the file system. And it is also having a capability to read the data from database also. So only thing is data set is changed. Just take the data set. Automatically, when the moment you take the data set which is pointing to the database, you can see the different options here. There are various options I'm having here. When I'm trying to read the data from database, you have a table, query, and stored procedure. This query is very, very important. 95% chances are there to use it. Okay. And rest of the percentage maybe, but in my case, I came 99% across. Only one time I used stored procedure. Only one time in my career.
Okay, do we
And
see stored procedure also, Bhaskar, as part of this training?
we are going to say stored procedure, but not for data processing point of view.
Okay.
I'm going to show you how we can create a stored procedure, but for logging details or to update the control table.
Okay, okay.
Okay, for there is some purpose for us to use the stored procedure, but not with the copy data activity, because when I go with the copy data activity, that is for actual data. Whatever you're doing here, that you're dealing with the actual data, that means you're dealing with the business data.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we are going to see that. So I'm going to take as it is the table, then we'll go for different approaches. Let's leave it here as it is, and I'm just going to take the sync. Your sync data set is your output data, output customer. So once you're done, if you want to test this, you don't need to publish it. You can directly test it. You can see here debug. So trigger test runs of the current pipeline without publishing your changes to the service. So you don't need to publish your changes. When you debug it, it is going to take your changes to run it. Let's hit on debug. Now it got succeeded. Now if you go and see your target is what? ADLS Gen 2, right? Just refresh it. Now you can see the output directory. Let's go inside the output directory. You can see there is a customer.csv file. Let's open it. Just cross verify is our data is available or not. You can see. Whatever the data is there in the database, the same data is available in the ADLS or not. You have it. Is everyone clear? How can we bring data from database to ADLS Gen 2?
Yes, yes. But why edit option is there in the ADLS?
So that is for testing purpose. Okay, if you wanted to do any modification, you can do it. But basically, we are not going to do it.
Bhaskar, I have one doubt. Actually, our database also on cloud, and we're moving data from database also on cloud.
Mhm.
So what is the reason behind that we are moving data in cloud?
You may have also data in the cloud databases, right?
Right.
Okay, so the reason why we are bringing data into the ADLS Gen 2, that
Yeah.
is the
Yes.
question. Even
Yes.
not only data which is there in the database which is in cloud, even on-prem database also, we are bringing all this data into ADLS, because this ADLS Gen 2 supports for big data processing. It
Okay.
accelerates your big data
For
processing.
further processing. Okay.
Exactly. Only for further processing.
Because means for further processing, it has become the input.
Exactly.
Okay.
For further processing, this will be the input.
Okay.
Sir, it is like a staging layer, sir. Now, like
You
from
can
source
feel
to
that.
okay,
Okay.
sir.
So not only that, there is a few more stages will be there. So that you are going to see.
Okay, sir.
Bhaskar, later can you tell what is the staging and then
No, there is
what
no
is the
staging
terminal?
concept. Keep in mind. If you go for
I
traditional
mean,
approach, if you go for traditional ETL, there is a traditional approach. Okay, like you have a database, and you're going to use the traditional ETL tools, and then you're going to have a staging database. They used to call it as a staging DB. Here there is no
that's why I'm
concept staging
asking.
DB.
I don't know what is staging DB.
Okay,
Is
so
there any
this is that's what I'm saying. You just ignore it, because if you say staging DB, we have to talk about the traditional approach. Okay, here we have
leave it.
a ADLS. That's all. Okay, then we need to talk about medallion architecture. So medallion architecture is going to have a bronze, silver, and gold. So this is required. These
Okay.
naming standards you have to use.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhaskar.
Because the people they're asking staging means they have some idea. Maybe they may have some idea about traditional approach. So they will start thinking, or they will start comparison.
Is a shading is an old concept current now.
Forget
SQL.
about it. It's not holding. It's a different approach.
Okay.
Okay. So if you try to compare with the traditional approach, you will get a lot of confusion. Just leave that entire thing outside and try to concentrate with new approach. Medallion architecture. Okay. So now I have shown you how we can do it. And if you wanted to write the SQL code, how we can use that second option is there as part of this, right? When you go for here, so I'm just going to have the second approach, that is query. So that we are going to see in the next session. Extensively, we are going to spend with on-prem SQL Server database, and how we can make a dynamic coding. Like it's not again, when I say dynamic SQL, you may feel like in SQL Server also, or SQL coding also, we have a dynamic SQL code. You can feel that similar kind of approach, but way of doing and purpose is also more or less same. Like intention is to make it work for multiple tables. Okay, so in the SQL Server also, dynamic SQL code will be used to make it dynamic. That means you can pass the values from outside, and you can make it work for multiple things. Okay, so how we are going to use this SQL code option, and how we can make it dynamic, that we are going to see on Monday. So basically tomorrow also I'm having a session, but tomorrow's session, please do not miss it, because I wanted to cross verify everyone's mission, whether you're having a data factor or not. So all the setup is required for everyone's. So if you're already having a setup, if everything is fine, if you're doing a practice, then you don't need to join on tomorrow's session. But if you're facing any issue while doing a practice, or if you're not in a position to connect your SQL server, or if you're not in a position to install SQL server in your machine, then please join on tomorrow's session and we'll sort it out. Today, right after this session, I'll share that recording session to set up your SQL server in on-prem, because If you use this continuously, you're going to be charged. So basically, I used to avoid this, and I'm going to have I'm going to use on-prem SQL Server. So this is an on-prem SQL Server. So you can see the comparison between them, how differences are there here. I have 3 options, and there are many options are available. If you want to bring as it is the same thing, then if you remember yesterday, or I think yesterday itself I shown, right, there is a managed instance in the Azure SQL. So they have to go with the managed instance if they wanted to have a same to same thing, or they can go with the SQL Server in a virtual machine. But if they go with a single database, only these 3 options we are going to have. Rest of them we are not going to have it. But forget about all those things. They are completely related to something else. But our journey is to talk about Azure data engineering processing.
Upper is Azure SQL and the lower is on-prem.
Yes, the lower one is on-prem SQL Server. So
So
how you
Monday,
can how you can set up it? I'll give a recorded session that will be more 15 minutes. You can go through that and set it up. And if you are facing any issue, just join on tomorrow. We'll try to solve it. And if you're not in a position to set up this, then you have to go with this one only.
yeah. Can we connect after the meeting? This meeting for my issue.
Yeah. We'll connect.
Bhaskar, would it
Yeah.
require client IP to connect Azure SQL on SSMS?
Basically, yeah, for connect to this one, we required client IP address. If network is changed, again, you have to add your IP address. Let's say some people may not connect this SQL Server. The reason it is not going to connect SQL Server is because the IP address was missed. Let's say I'm using my home network now. If I go to the different location, if I try to connect it, it is not going to allow, because you have to whitelist your IP address. How you are going to whitelist your IP address after creation of this is, you can use this set server firewall. In set server firewall, you can have your IP address here, and my IP address is same. You can see here, I already having this IP address. You can just add it and you can start doing practice. Okay, if it is not connected, because and one more thing, if you use the mobile network, then it is not going to work. You have to use the Wi-Fi network. So then only your IP address will be stable. Otherwise, your IP address is going to continuously changes. So in that case, you have to the starting range and the ending range should be fall. Okay, so I'll tell you. I think somewhere I kept that IP address starting range and ending range. Even for your mobile network also will work, but do not share your details, your server details with anyone. That is one important thing. Otherwise, you will get a lot of charge. Of course, you are going to use only, but we have a feasibility if you have only mobile network. But I always recommend to have a Wi-Fi network or a cable network. Okay, so to avoid all these things, if you can have a on-prem SQL Server, then you can do all this practice with on-prem SQL Server. It doesn't make any difference except connectivity.
Okay, Bhaskar. And do we need to install those sample databases you have provided?
Yes. I have explained in the recorded session. I'll share that, and you just follow that and do setup.
Where do we install? On-prem or
on-prem? On-prem only. That installation is on-prem only. This SQL Server is in my on-prem SQL system.
Okay. I will
Okay.
install all.
Yeah. Any other question?
No.
Okay. So from Monday there will be little fastness will be there, because we already come across a few things. So complete your practice.
Yeah, Bhaskar, can you help me to configure this server? SQL?
Yes. Yeah, Bhaskar.
Man, what server? This one? Azure SQL Server?
No, the AD1, the second one.
That's what I'm saying. I'll share one recording. Go through that step by step. And if you're still facing an issue, join on tomorrow's session. I'll help you.
Okay, done.
Okay?
Done.
You got my
Thank
point,
you.
right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, then by tomorrow, everyone should be ready to do all the practice.
Yeah.
Okay, so do not say, I don't have this or I don't have that.
Right.
Okay?
Okay, Bhaskar.
Because practice is important.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bhaskar.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you, sir.
and we'll see you
Thank you,
on
Bhaskar.
tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good episode.